All right. Hi, everyone. This is going to be the second part to the basic migrations and models tutorial. So earlier we had a dogs model and a dogs table created, and we saw how we could use this dog model to create instances of a dog and use that to change some information, insert it to the table, and use the dog model to grab that information back out of the table. The second part, we're just going to focus on just like, I guess we're just going to do some more deeper exploration of models and migrations and just to see what happens when we do certain things. But I want to first start off with something that I think you'll need for the homework, actually. So I showed you that we could have like d equals dog.new, create a new instance of a dog, and then to save it, we call d.save, right? So now when we do dog.all, since I had 2 from earlier, I should have 3 dogs, and we could just do a count by dog.count. All right, so what you can do when you call dog.new is pass in a hash of attributes. So let's say I want to set a name to H and its age to 5. So using Ruby's syntactic sugar, it's going to convert this into like a little hash map of with the key name and the key age, but we don't need that. We're just going to rely on the syntactic sugar. So when we do dog.new, pass in the hash map of name age and age 5, it's going to create me this dog right here, and it has the values already made for me. So I could easily call, like, I could chain this with a dot save. So this first half will left to save will evaluate to a new dog, and when I call dot save on it, it's going to commit that dog, and I could basically query for the dog by doing d.find. Since I know it's the 4th dog I made, as I could just query for that, and now D holds the ID for name H, age 5, and the rest of its information. And here's I know Charles went over some like querying tricks in lecture. I'm just go over some few basic ones. So if you want to get the first dog in your database, like the first one you inserted, you just do dog.first. This method comes from inheriting from active record base, because active record base will just give you these methods for free. So dog.first, I get Fido, if you remember our first dog. And if I do like something like dog.second, I get the second dog we made. I believe dog.third works. You get the 3rd dog that was made. And I don't know how long this continues, but I've got some really basic ones made for you. And a nice one is dog.last, which allows you to see the last dog you made. And now the last thing I want to show you is create. So you notice how I do something like dog.new, then I call save after it. But let's say I just called save on nothing, so that's why I errored out. But let's say I want to do a new and a save at the same time. I could just say dog.create name. Let's just name him C, right? So I'll pass in this hash of the key's name and the value is just string C. And what it's going to do is basically call dog.new on this hash, and then right after call dog.save. So you can see it made it committed a transaction to insert this new dog. So then when I do dog.last, it's going to show me the newest dog, and it's this dog with ID 5 named C. So using create, I didn't have to call both .new and .save. I could just chain them together with the create. All right. Now I just want to go a little to exploring what happens when we do things. So let's say I go to my dog model, right? And actually just change it to, just add an O at the end. So now I have like a Dogo class, right? And right now I changed the name of this model what happens when I do Rails console? I have Rails C as like a shortcut for Rails console in case that is confusing anybody. But if I do Dogo, it's going to error out. And when I do dog, that's also going to error out. So with Dogo, there's no table it relates to, right? But with dog, I've no longer got a model. So because dog makes an inference on so originally when I had the original dog, right, it would make an inference for it will know that it has a table called dogs in our database, which we created through this migration. You see how we call create table for dogs. But for Dogo, since I have this model, right? Oh, I must have misspelled it earlier. So it's going to try to, oh, I have a Dogo class, right? It's going to, I should confuse why it didn't work earlier. But anyways, moving on. I have this Dogo. It tries to connect. I have it in my Ruby right here. But when I do dogo.new, it's just going to break. And if we look at like the, look at the thing, this error, it says statement invalid, cannot find table Dogos. So this is because with this new Dogo class, it's going to say, hey, the pluralized version is this, and I'm going to have this table. But our error says we didn't find this table because we never created a table. Let's say we want to just create a table. Let's see. Sorry. Let's go down. Exit out. I'm gonna do this. Rails generate migration add Dogo and or I'm gonna call it create Dogo. So I have migration file, a new one, right? So all it does is it creates a table for me. It will say create Dogos. I don't have any like fields on this Dogos table. So I'm just gonna steal this piece of code right here, put it in. Now this Dogos will have a name, right? So it still won't exactly work. Even if I do, or it's not gonna work perfectly per se. Because when I do Dogos, wait, what? Dogo. When I establish connection, right? I'm gonna do dogo.new, and it's still going to break because it still couldn't find the table, right? And but what about this? Didn't we create this table? Well, no, we only created the migration for the table, right? We have a we've defined a change, right? We said we're gonna insert this new table of database, but we haven't actually we defined the change, but we haven't actually ran the change. We haven't run the change. So what we're gonna do is run rake db migrate. If you remember from the first half, this is the command that you run migrations. You run rake db migrate. And now we have a table called Dogos. Rails console. And now Dogo. What? Dogo is here. If we now call dogo.new, we can see now we have, it works fine because the table is there. Now active record could make an inference on the table and say, hey, this Dogo model, this instances of the Dogo model should have these fields. And I just figured out why it was erroring out when I first called Dogos is because I left the file name as dog.rb, so it didn't really like. So this is what happens when I called Dogo. It tried to find Dogos in my the file names of my models, right? But since it failed right there, and then I called dog right after, and it found the dog file and loaded the Dogo class. But it realized that's not what we were looking, like it couldn't find a dog class within it, so it errored out. But after running dog, it loaded this class, so now I have Dogo in it. Anyways, continuing on, now it has these fields, right? So now let's say, that's just a contrived example. Let's say I want to go back to it referencing to dog. So I'm going to restart my console. So I call dog. It's perfectly fine because it found the dog table, and within the dog table, it has the fields, dog ID, name, owner, stuff like that, right? Let's say I want to add, let's say I want to add a field called trained, right? What I could do, Rails provides me a generator to generate migrations. I do Rails generate migration. I'm going to name the migration, like the first argument after is just the name of the migration. Just try to be as descriptive as possible. So let's say add trained to dogs. And what it's going to be is trained Boolean. The name of the column I want to be is trained, and the type I want it to be a Boolean. So I'm going to generate this migration. And if I run Rails console again and look at dog.new, it doesn't have trained in it. And the reason is because even though we created migration, we created instructions for change, we still haven't ran it yet. So when I run rake db migrate, it's gonna add the column to it, and when I do dog.new, it will now have it trained. Now, you're wondering how, oh, you might be wondering at least, like, how did the migration file like know that this is the most recent migration, that this is the, how did it know to create a column through this generator to add it to the dogs table? So it inferred trained and Boolean from the fact that it was an argument I handed to the generator right here. I'm going to highlight it, trained and Boolean. But where did it figure out which table to add it to? When you run a generator, it will search for, in the file name, a string 2. And after the string is, they're going to assume that's the name of your table. So it figured to add to the dogs table a trained Boolean. And interesting, and no, not interesting, important thing to do is never change a migration after you run it. It's been mentioned in class during lecture, but let's say for some reason I want to take out, like, let's say I never wanted to record owner my dogs, right? And I try to like remove this line, rake db migrate. Everything's going to be fine at first, but somewhere down the line, I'm going to say, I run rake db migrate, nothing breaks, right? But if I take out the migration file, it reads this as deltas. It remembers the last migration it ran. It didn't see any new migrations that were ran after I added the train to dogs. So when I do Rails console and I do dog.new, it's still going to have name and owner because it never ran. It doesn't rerun this migration. These are deltas. It only runs new ones. So when it says, oh, this create dogs was running a long time ago, like, people don't change their migration file, so I'm not going to look at it, right? That you never actually take out the owner from the dog. That's why you always add migrations on top rather than change migrations that have already been ran. And a last little note to check out whether or not you or a good way to look at what your database looks like is going to the schema.rb file. It's in your database directory, schema.rb. It's going to see, hey, you have your schema will say, hey, you have a dog table with names, and your dogs will have, you have a dogos table with names, sorry, and you have a dog with a table, a dog's table with name, owner, age, and the Boolean trained. All right. So how do you actually, if you want to actually remove a column, you can just say, just make a, run the Rails generator. So Rails generate migration, remove trained from dogs. And generate this migration. It's going to create this new migration. And I'm going to say, this one, it could infer from the left side from the from or anything, right? So sometimes you have to check to see whether or not it inferred the correct change. This time it failed. So what I'm going to do is manually write the migration change. So I know it from the, I'm pretty sure it's remove column. You have the first argument to remove column is the table. So I know it's the dogs table. And I'm going to call, and I know the column I want to remove is called trained. So I'm going to run rake db migrate because I defined the delta. I'm going to actually run the delta. It seemed like it successfully worked. So when I do Rails C or Rails console, I can see that when I create a new dog, oh, whoops, I spelled Don. I create a new dog, it no longer has the trained. And this should be, I would say, a good amount of information for you guys to be able to do your homework. And hopefully it, with the video, you could pause and things could be clearer. If you have any questions, please post on Piazza or come to office hours. Thank you.